Our tale begins with the epic confrontation between the mighty hero and the demon king. The latter attempts to crush the hero with a gargantuan crater, but defying all odds, the hero propels a mere pebble he picked up from the earth. The stone, aided by the hero's sheer force, repels the crater and even shatters it. The hero then declares to the demon king that the end is near. They each unleash their ultimate abilities, clashing with a force that raises everything in the vicinity. Both opponents are pushed to their limits, yet they continue to battle. Their fight concludes in a draw, with both participants impaling each other. Relieved that it's finally over, the hero embraces the peace. Sometime later, we meet an unusual young man named Blade entering the Hero Academy. He's eager for a normal life and excitedly interacts with everyone, hoping to make friends. Despite his enthusiastic approach, a group of students find him peculiar. He encounters Kasim, Clay, Claire, and Jessica and explains he's simply there for friendships. Intrigued, Claire asks if he wants to be their friend, to which Blade agrees readily. It seems he's managed to secure 4 friendships already. Just then, the school's top student, Ernest Flaming, intervenes, curious about the commotion. Unfamiliar with Blade, she inquires about his identity. Claire explains Blade is a new transfer student, a concept Ernest finds strange, since the academy traditionally accepts only prospective heroes and rarely permits late admissions. Blade insists he harbors no aspirations of heroism, only wishes to form friendships, which raises doubts in Ernest's mind about his resolve. Undeterred, Blade requests Ernest's assistance in finding the headmaster's office. Upon entering the office, Ernest is taken aback to find the king rather than the headmaster. Bowing reverently, she apologizes for Blade's informal behavior. Recognizing Ernest as the top student, the king announces his role as the new headmaster, leading Ernest to excitedly admire him. However, the king requests Ernest to excuse them as he needs to converse with Blade privately. This leaves Ernest puzzled over Blade's casual familiarity with the king. The revelation soon follows. Blade is the very great hero who fought the demon king, and the king seeks to help him regain his powers. Blade, however, yearns for an ordinary life, asserting that with the demon king vanquished, his heroic services are redundant. Nevertheless, the king persists in his efforts to restore Blade's powers, calling him the great hero. In the training area, Ernest expresses surprise at Blade's presence in the advanced class. She accuses him of resorting to deceitful means to join the advanced class, given his lukewarm resolve. Unfazed, Blade asserts his earnest desire to form friendships within the academy. As Ernest continues her protests, Blade introduces himself to the other students while simultaneously reassuring Ernest of his attention. Her frustration peaks as she unsheathes her sword, resulting in damage to a wall. Following an announcement by a student named Sophie, Ernest calls on the instructor, requesting a demonstration of Blade's capabilities. The instructor hesitates, citing a different plan for the day, but capitulates under Ernest's intimidating insistence. Ernest urges Blade to prove his worth by slicing through a dummy equipped with enchanted armor, a task all advanced students are capable of. Accepting the challenge, Blade conjures a wind-based technique and showers the dummy, resulting in the wall's destruction and his sword's disintegration. A look around reveals the students battered by his display of power, but Blade maintains his claim of ordinariness. During a break, Blade joins Ernest and invites his friends to do the same. Upon their refusal, he's puzzled. Ernest explains that the table is her reserved spot and that the students fear her. As they enjoy their meal, Ernest retracts her earlier criticism, though Blade doesn't recall what she'd said. He thanks her for her help, and since they're sharing a meal, considers her his friend, causing her to blush. That evening, Ernest, lost in thoughts of Blade, rejoices in making her first friend. Suddenly, her sword begins to shake. In a flashback, a young Ernest is seen approaching the demon's sword. A voice commands her surrender. Upon touching the sword, her hair turns red, and from then on, voices in her head urge her to obliterate everything. Returning to the present, Ernest refuses to succumb to the sword's desires, which quells its shaking. Her day concludes with a duel against a boy named Leonard. Leonard boldly attacks her with his lance, but she easily parries, sending him sprawling. It is then Sophie's turn to spar with Ernest. They match each other blow for blow until Ernest employs her fire skill, forcing Sophie to withdraw and acknowledge defeat. Just as Ernest is about to square off against Blade, a peculiar energy overwhelms her and she collapses. Blade rushes her to the infirmary, where the doctor reveals that Ernest is under a curse and there's little she can do to assist. Upon regaining consciousness, Ernest is confused and can't recall the prior events. She fears she may have caused harm, but Blade soothes her worries, explaining she simply fainted. The doctor recommends she rests more, but Ernest, keen to leave, dismisses the advice. Against the doctor's wishes, Blade offers to care for her, even carrying her around. However, Ernest insists on walking when they encounter other students, requesting Blade to keep her condition private. Meanwhile, Blade delves into the Academy's database, learning about a demon sword known as Asmodeus. He confronts Ernest, revealing he knows her secret. Asmodeus is reputed to bestow vast power on its wielder, but it also has its own sentient will. Ernest discloses that she first encountered the sword kept by her family at 6 years old. Touching it triggered the demon's will to fuse with her, and she has been fighting its destructive desires ever since. Blade suggests she seek Asmodeus' acknowledgement of her as its rightful bearer, though Ernest fears awakening the demon. Blade assures her he will destroy it if necessary. That evening, Ernest summons Asmodeus to form a pact and test her might. As she is engulfed by a fiery pillar, Asmodeus materializes and a demon erupts from the fire, bent on destruction. Blade swiftly defeats it, providing Ernest with the confidence to confront Asmodeus with her sword. As their powers clash, Ernest emerges victorious. Blade catches her as she stumbles, both relieved and happy she's safe. The following day, Blade defeats 2 opponents effortlessly in a duel, prompting Ernest to advise him to show respect to his adversaries by at least drawing his sword. She then asked Blade to look after Sophie, mentioning her constant solitude and unwavering obedience. Since Sophie had previously introduced herself to Blade, Ernest believes he is capable of handling her. Blade approaches Sophie, offering to help with her training. Sophie admits she was only trained in unarmed combat. Blade insists on teaching her the way of the sword. Though she initially struggles, Blade guides her to perceive the sword as an extension of herself. Demonstrating this, he easily slices through a dummy. Sophie quickly improves but acknowledges that reaching Ernest's level will be a challenge. With a surprising move, she takes down Blade in hand-to-hand combat, confirming her physical strength. She then requests Blade to teach her additional skills. The next day, the king inquires about Blade's school life. Blade mentions he has made friends, specifically citing Sophie. The king recognizes Sophie's strength but remarks on her incomplete nature, revealing she was created with the intent to surpass Blade. He explains the artificial Great Hero Project, where an individual was selected for their potential and subjected to countless experiments aiming to artificially endow the Great Hero's powers. Sophie's real identity is revealed to be Sophie Tefanto, the 12th clone of Sophitia. She was objectified and used for relentless experiments, distressing Blade. However, the king reassures him that the organization has been disbanded. Blade, feeling guilt for Sophie's lost normal life, desires to restore it, but feels unqualified due to his own unusual life. He consults the school doctor about what constitutes a normal life and learns it is associated with youth. He asks Leonard about the concept of youth, which Leonard equates with love. Blade continues his inquiry about love with Jessica and Claire, who inform him that it usually involves dating. Claire informs Blade that dating is a common activity among lovers. Curious, Blade consults Ernest about what a date entails. She explains the romantic nuances of dating, but suggests it might be too soon for them to engage in such activities. However, Blade, now equipped with his newfound knowledge, hastily announces that he is off to a date, leaving Ernest wondering about his intended partner. Unexpectedly, Blade storms into the girls' dressing room, catching Sophie off guard in her state of undress. Regardless, he proposes they go on a date, and she concurs. Blade's friends covertly observe him rendezvousing with Sophie, who is admittedly oblivious about dating. Blade assures her and presents a detailed plan for their date. However, Sophie points out that they are already behind schedule, causing Blade to fret about their next move. Sophie pragmatically suggests they simply get going, and the two of them enjoy their shared time. Their date leads them to an arcade where they play a punching game, resulting in the destruction of the machines. Blade's friends, still spying on the pair, generously cover the damages. They later share a tropical beverage, their cheeks brushing each other as they sip. From afar, Ernest watches the scene unfold with distaste, labeling them as filthy animals. Her friends offer her a delectable parfait to distract her, only to find that Blade and Sophie have disappeared when she finishes. Upon realizing their schedule is off track, Blade begins to panic, but Sophie reassures him that they can take a shortcut. They leap and bound across the town to reach their next destination, a legendary fountain. There, Sophie confides that she has enjoyed their date and curiously asks Blade about his intentions. He simply responds that it's what friends do. Believing that friends shouldn't have secrets, Sophie reveals her extraordinary nature. She's not an ordinary human, but an artificial hero, a result of experimental procedures designed to instill the great hero's powers. She demonstrates her abilities by warping a railing, explaining she can alter physical laws but struggles to control her powers. She also admits that she can increase her weight and even stop time for 10 seconds. As the final model of the Artificial Hero Project, she is considered successful despite her limitations. In the spirit of honesty, Blade reciprocates by revealing his past as the great hero, startling Sophie. He expresses remorse for her circumstances, acknowledging the burden of the great hero's power as a curse. Blade confesses he never desired the title or the accompanying responsibilities, which fell onto him at 3 years old when his powers manifested. He fought countless battles to save everyone but faced resentment for not being able to protect everyone. Overwhelmed, Blade breaks down in tears. However, Sophie comforts him, asserting that he should take pride in the lives he saved. She, in fact, aspires to emulate him. The following day, while dining together, Ernest tells Blade about a magical beast the king brought to the academy. Suddenly, the ground trembles as a dragon appears, inciting panic among the soldiers. Blade calmly approaches the dragon, punches it into submission, and offers it food. All are astonished as he disarms the dragon single-handedly, yet Blade modestly states that anyone could have done the same given the dragon's weakness. The dragon transforms into a young girl who affectionately clings to Blade, addressing him as her father. This baffles Blade, who promises to find her parents, unaware that the dragon had transformed into the girl. In the evening, Blade assists the girl, now named Q, with her bath. Ernest walks in on them, surprised at the sight. Blade queries her about magical beasts, particularly dragons. She explains that when a magical beast is defeated, its flesh may perish, but its soul endures, assuming the form of the stronger being that vanquished it. Upon learning this, Blade wonders if a human-defeated dragon could take human form. He questions if Q might have been defeated by a human in a previous life. The conversation takes an awkward turn when Q unexpectedly reveals herself, leading to an upset Ernest, who labels Blade a pervert and stomps off. The next day, as Blade feeds Q, she confesses that she can feed herself, but prefers being fed by Blade, claiming it enhances the taste in the food. Claire attempts to feed Q, but Q declines, stating she doesn't befriend weaklings. She demands Blade's undivided attention, insisting on morning kisses and being hand-fed meals. She reprimands Blade for his excessive ogling of other women, declaring it intolerable. This revelation astonishes his friends, who query him about it. Blade, feigning ignorance, denies any such behavior, but his friends aren't convinced, viewing him as a loathsome figure and excluding him from training sessions. During one of these sessions, Blade spots Q wandering around the training grounds and invites her over. Simultaneously, his friends approach him, requesting guidance since they could advance to a higher class. Jessica desires to specialize in espionage, Sophie's field of expertise, so Blade recommends her to train under Sophie. As training is about to commence, Q abruptly vanishes. As Blade wonders about her whereabouts, we see Q exploring the academy grounds. She stumbles upon a group of students during a training session. They invite her to participate, but she dismisses them as unworthy and flees. Q eventually runs into Blade, complaining of hunger. Blade obliges and treats her to a meal. With Q asleep, Blade confides in Ernest about Dragon's nature. They imprint on the first strong entity they encounter after birth, seeing it as their parent. He fears Q would feel utterly alone if he stopped acting as her parent, given she's been alone since birth. Ernest grasps the gravity of Blade's decision to care for Q when she overhears Sophie voicing her concern. Blade reassures Sophie that everything is under control, and they return to their respective rooms only to find Q missing. Blade eventually locates Q on the rooftop, where she explains the calming effect of the moonlands on her. She imagines the larger moon as a parent and the smaller one as a child, a sight she often sought solace in while alone in the wastelands. Blade questions whether Q wants to make friends, but she dismisses the idea, asserting that dragons are superior to humans and that Blade is all she needs. The next day, Blade entrusts Q to the king's care. However, Q dislikes the king's company and hastily departs. A frantic search ensues, and Blade eventually finds Q in a room, engrossed in playing with dolls representing the academy's students. She names each doll after a student, pretending they are all her friends. This sight saddens Blade, causing him to bang his head against a wall. Ernest intervenes, and Blade confides in her about Q's need for friends, but he believes it to be impossible due to Q's dismissive view of humans. Ernest suggests that Blade can't solve this issue single-handedly and recommends seeking help. Together, they approach the training area where Blade pleads with his fellow students to help by defeating Q. Knowing the task's difficulty, Blade implores them to undertake it, with Ernest vowing to fight alongside them. At this juncture, other concerned classmates arrive, requesting their fellow students' support in challenging Q. The students consent, and as Q descends from the sky, they ready themselves to face her. Meanwhile, the king watches from afar. The king's servant questions whether a dragon would concede defeat if it were overcome by a multitude of humans. The king asserts that dragons view humans as a collective entity, thus it still counts as a fair battle. The incident where humans ensnared Q is brought up. She was incapacitated by a trap, unable to retaliate. Blade reminds Q that circumstances have changed and encourages her to acknowledge the resilience of humans. As Cabre breathes fire, Ernest readies her sword and rallies the troops for the looming battle. Q counters with a swipe of her tail, sending the students into disarray. However, Ernest lands a strike, reminding the students of their training. They reassemble, launching a calculated assault on Ku's blind spot, much to the king's amusement. Despite this, the king believes their efforts insufficient to penetrate the dragon's scales. Ku retaliates, knocking some students away, tipping the scales in her favor. Sophie and Ernest respond, with Sophie landing a punch in Ernest using her demon sword. Despite the king's skepticism, Blade explains it was a mere diversion, and Ku tumbles into a pit. The king argues the use of traps is unfair, but Blade counters, saying the trap was constructed during the fight. Leonard had dubbed the pit, while the others distracted Ku. The students regroup for another charge, with Ernest readying another assault. Asmodeus struggles from excessive usage, but Ernest dismisses his complaints and attacks Ku again. Ku attempts to escape by flying, but is knocked back by Ernest. Sophie employs gravity manipulation for a powerful strike, and Blade signals Ernest to deliver the final blow. Despite her weariness, Asmodeus gathers her remaining power and the other students join in, transferring their energy to her. Ernest conjures a gigantic flame and strikes Ku down. Ku reverts to her human form and breaks down in tears, deeming herself weak. Blade reassures her that it isn't her weakness but human strength that she should acknowledge and befriend. They all agree to be friends, and days later, they are seen dining together and enjoying Ku's company. Blade notes a change in Ernest, which causes panic among his friends. When they attempt to downplay the issue, Blade observes that Ernest seems to have gained weight. The revelation shocks Ernest, who bolts from the room, declaring their friendship over. Blade remains clueless about his wrongdoing. After 3 days, with Ernest secluding herself in her room, Blade grows despondent. He yearns to make amends, but is cautioned by his friends about his ignorance of Ernest's grievance. They accompany him to Ernest's room, but despite their knocking, there's no response. They eventually pick the lock and find Ernest on the floor, seemingly in tears. However, upon turning on the lights, they discover Ernest gorging on sweets. She admits to developing a sweet tooth following their confrontation with Ku. Blade questions their friendship status, and Ernest affirms their friendship but admits her embarrassment. The revelation is a relief for Blade, who prepares to leave. But his friends insist on helping Ernest, and Jessica suggests Leonard demonstrate how. Leonard pledges unwavering devotion to Ernest, irrespective of her size, only to be rebuffed by her. Blade takes a shot, reminding her that her friends are her support system, and Ernest agrees to try. Their efforts to assist Ernest include exercise routines and a healthier diet. Despite the intensive workout regime and a sparse lunch, Ernest's weight remains unaffected. In desperation, she uses her sword's power, invoking a fiery transformation that consumes a massive amount of calories. However, the drastic measure leaves her famished, and she begins to lose control, charging at her friends. Blade manages to overpower her, restoring her to her normal state. They are disheartened to find Ernest back to her previous state shortly after, indulging in sweets. Despite her friends' disappointment, Ernest dismisses their concern, assuring them she can revert to her fiery form when necessary.